My name is Imogen Hale. I am 32 years old, and a retired professor of civil engineering from the University of Illinois is standing at my end of the table at Harvest Table Restaurant in Cedar Falls, Iowa, holding a glass of Cab Franc, and the toast he started for my sister and her fiancé has quietly, deliberately, become something else entirely. He stopped walking when he reached my chair. One moment ago he was talking about the kind of character it takes to build a life with another person. My mother was glowing at the far end of the table. My sister Gemma had her head tilted against Joel's shoulder, the way she does when she's happy and knows it. Then Dr. Whitaker looked down at me, set his glass on the tablecloth, and said, in a voice that carried easily through the ambient noise of the restaurant, "I have to be honest. I was not entirely sure when my son told me his future sister-in-law was an engineer. But I have to ask, are you the Imogen Hale on the Cartwright Bridge project team?" Every conversation at the table stopped. My mother made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Oh, Imogen works more on the management side of things. The paperwork, the crew logistics, very behind the scenes." Dr. Whitaker did not look at her. To explain how I became the daughter my mother described to people as doing something in construction, very technical. Not really dinner conversation. I have to tell you about the refrigerator door. My mother keeps a gallery on the refrigerator in the kitchen of our house in Cedar Falls. She has kept it since Gemma and I were in elementary school. Magnetic frames, a few clear plastic sleeves, printed photos, clippings from the Cedar Falls Gazette. When Gemma joined the dance team in 9th grade, my mother laminated the program and put it front and center, right below the water filter reminder sticker, where nobody could miss it. When Gemma got hired at her first job out of community college, my mother printed the hotel's website landing page, their tagline and everything, and hung it with a little ladybug magnet. My section of the fridge was smaller. It always had been. There was a swim team photo from 4th grade, half of it covered by a pizza delivery menu from a place called Gino's that had been there so long the edges had yellowed. I counted once. The menu had been on that refrigerator door for 11 years. When I was 26, right after a project I contributed to was published in a civil engineering trade journal, I emailed my mother a link. She wrote back 4 hours later and said it was great, and she was proud and she would have to read it properly when she had more time. 2 weeks after that, I came home for Thanksgiving and noticed she had printed something and added it to the fridge. I thought, here we go, finally. She had printed a lemon bar recipe from the same journal's food and lifestyle sidebar. It was pinned exactly where I had hoped my name might go. My swim photo is still behind the pizza menu. I checked at Christmas. I call it the refrigerator test. I ran it for years without naming it, checking whether anything had changed. The way you press a bruise to see if it still hurts. It always did. I am the older daughter. Gemma is 28, 4 years behind me, and she has always been the one my mother introduces first, describes longest, and worries about most loudly, which in our family's language means most lovingly. This is not Gemma's fault. I want to be clear about that. My sister is warm and chaotic and genuinely funny, and she makes friends in grocery store checkout lines, which is a gift I have never understood but have always admired. The problem was not Gemma. The problem was what my mother built around her. To hear my mother tell it, Gemma was essentially running a high-end hospitality empire. What Gemma actually does is coordinate events for a mid-size hotel chain out of Des Moines. Corporate retreats, regional conventions, the occasional wedding weekend. She is good at it. She is organized in the precise, color-coded way that otherwise chaotic people sometimes are, and she makes vendors feel respected, which is rarer than it sounds. My mother told her book club that Gemma was a brand experience architect, overseeing high-profile client portfolios. She told our aunt in Dubuque that Gemma managed luxury event design for a regional hospitality brand. She told our neighbor on the corner that Gemma was essentially a creative director. Gemma schedules caterers. She confirms AV rentals. She chases down vendors who forget to file liability paperwork. There is nothing wrong with any of that. The lie was the problem. When I pointed it out once, gently, my mother looked at me the way she does when she thinks I am being difficult and said, "It is called putting your best foot forward, Imogen. Not everything has to be so precise. Precision is, as it happens, my entire profession. I am a licensed structural engineer. I have been working in the field for 7 years, the last 4 of them as a senior project engineer at Beckett and Lorne, a mid-size civil and structural firm based in Chicago. Before that, I spent 3 years in Indianapolis doing load analysis and foundation reviews on commercial builds, the unglamorous backbone work that most people never think about until something goes wrong. The project that made my professional name, at least inside the relatively small and specific world of structural engineering, was the Cartwright Pedestrian Bridge in Lincoln Park. I joined the project during its early design phase, developed the load distribution methodology for the main deck span, and remained as lead structural engineer through the final 18 months of construction. The bridge opened 2.5 years ago. It won an American Society of Civil Engineers Early Career Excellence Award. There is a plaque bolted to a post at the north end of the bridge with my firm's name on it, and my name is in the award citation that ASCE published in their quarterly report. My mother, when asked by her friends or her book club, or Gemma's future in-laws what her older daughter did for work, said that I managed some of the technical side of a construction project in Chicago, and that I had moved around a lot and gone through some rough patches professionally. I know the second part, because Audrey Whittaker told me, 3 weeks after the rehearsal dinner, over coffee in Wicker Park. But I am getting ahead of myself. The night of the dinner, I drove down from Chicago on a Friday, 4.5 hours in light traffic, and pulled into my parents' driveway at 6:40 in the evening. My mother opened the door before I reached the porch steps. She looked at my coat, my bag, my hair, the quick inventory she has always done, checking some standard I was never given the rubric for. "You made good time," she said, which is her version of hello. Then, "Come in, we should go over a few things before we leave." Inside, she moved through the kitchen in that particular way she has when she is managing a production. Swift, purposeful, slightly ahead of every sentence. She had written place cards for the restaurant. Mine was at the far end of the table, near the kitchen corridor, between the wall and Gemma's old college roommate who was in from out of town. "Silas is very distinguished," she said, meaning Dr. Whittaker. "He was a professor at Illinois for 30 years. Joel's family they're accomplished. I just want tonight to be easy." She paused, folding a cloth napkin she didn't need to fold. "You know how you can get when you start talking about work." I asked how I got. "Intense," she said. "Technical. It's not cocktail conversation, what you do. There's no simple way to explain it to people outside the field, and it tends to dominate a room." She set the napkin down. "Just let me handle the introductions. Be pleasant. Tonight is about your sister." At Harvest Table, the Whittakers were already seated when we arrived. Dr. Silas Whittaker stood when we came in. The automatic courtesy of someone for whom it had become reflex. He was solid and gray-templed, with the specific stillness of a person who has spent decades in rooms where he was the one being listened to. Audrey was beside him, quick to smile, the kind of warm that doesn't feel performed. My mother moved through the introductions with practiced ease. Gemma was our creative director. She manages high-end events and client relationships. She has this real gift for bringing a vision together. You'll love hearing about some of the things she's pulled off this year. I was our oldest. She's in construction management, very technical, very detail-oriented, a short pause, a slight pivot, mostly project logistics. She keeps the behind-the-scenes things running. Dr. Whittaker shook my hand. He held it a moment longer than the handshake strictly required. He said my name once to himself, very quietly, like he was filing it somewhere he'd want to find it later. Dinner was my mother's composition, performed in real time. She poured wine and passed bread and narrated Gemma's recent highlights, and laughed at Joel's jokes, a seat, early to signal that the table should follow. Twice when Audrey tried to ask me something. Once about Chicago. Once about what kinds of projects I worked on. My mother answered before I finished my opening word. The third time, Audrey looked directly at me and framed the question more deliberately. "What are you working on right now, Imogen?" My mother was already forming a sentence. Dr. Whittaker tapped his water glass. It wasn't loud. It was the precise, calibrated sound of a man who has spent 30 years in lecture halls and knows exactly how much silence a single tap can produce. He stood. He buttoned the middle button of his jacket. He spoke about Joel, about the kind of steadiness his son had grown into, about what it means to choose a partner and, in doing so, to choose a family. He gave Gemma a genuine sentence about the way she made his son laugh without trying. Then he picked up his glass, stepped back from his chair, and walked the long way around the outer edge of the table. He walked slowly, the way people walk when they are in no hurry and they know it. He stopped at my chair. "I have to be honest," he said. "I wasn't entirely sure when my son told me his future sister-in-law was an engineer, but I just realized. Are you the Imogen Hale on the Cartwright Bridge project team?" My mother made the sound again, the bright, thin laugh. "Oh, Imogen is more on the management side, the logistics, crew coordination, very behind the scenes. It's hard to explain without the context." He didn't look at her. I thought about the abbreviated version of myself I had learned to deliver, in rooms where I sensed the longer version wasn't wanted. The one where I said construction and watched people nod and move on. I thought about the refrigerator test. I thought about the lemon bar recipe. "I was the lead structural engineer on the Cartwright project," I said. "I developed the load distribution system for the deck span and led the structural team through the build. Before that, I led the analysis work on the Meridian Overpass rebuild in Indianapolis." Dr. Whittaker's expression did not change, but something settled behind his eyes. The look of a man whose suspicion has just been confirmed in the best possible direction. That bridge, he said, turning slightly toward the table while keeping his attention on me, was submitted to the American Society of Civil Engineers Early Career Excellence Awards 3 years ago. He paused. She won. The citation specifically highlighted the load path methodology she developed for the main span. I used it as a case study in my graduate structural seminar for 2 consecutive years. The table went quiet in a very specific way. The way a room goes quiet when the story everyone understood turns out to have had a chapter missing. Audrey set her fork down slowly. She looked at my mother, and when she spoke, her voice was level and carefully pleasant, which somehow landed harder than anything sharp would have. Barbara, when we had coffee back in September, you mentioned that Imogen had moved around quite a bit and that she'd gone through some rough patches. You said it was better not to bring up her work situation around the family. My mother's hands found her napkin. I didn't want the evening to get complicated, she said. Imogen's work, it's not easy for people to understand. And when she starts explaining it, she can go very deep into the technical side, and tonight was meant to be. Mom. Gemma's voice was quiet. I had never heard that particular edge in it before. You told them she had rough patches. I was trying to protect. From what? Gemma said. From knowing what she does. She looked at me and her face held something that didn't need translating. Imogen has been a licensed engineer for 7 years. She has a national award. She works at a respected firm in Chicago. She looked back at my mother. Why would that be something to keep quiet? You're easier to explain, my mother said, and I think she believed that answered the question. What you do makes sense to people. What Imogen does, I always get it wrong and then she corrects me, and I feel like I've said something stupid in front of everyone, so I simplified it. So, you made up something that fit better instead, my father said. It was the most he had said at a table in years. He looked tired when he said it. Not angry, just tired. It landed heavier than anger would have. Audrey said something then that I have thought about many times since. She looked at the table when she said it. Not at my mother, not at anyone in particular. There is a difference between not understanding what your child does for a living and deciding that what they do doesn't fit the story you want to tell. My mother opened her mouth. She closed it. Gemma looked at Joel for a long moment. He reached across and took her hand. She let him, but she didn't look away from my mother. I need to understand something. Did you tell his family that Imogen had professional problems because you genuinely believed that? Or because it was easier than explaining that your older daughter is an award-winning engineer? And you don't know how to talk about it? Silence. Gemma pulled her hand back gently. She didn't take off her ring. She just folded both hands in her lap. I love you, but I need to think about what tonight means about what I don't know. Dr. Whitaker reached into his jacket pocket. He walked back around the table and set a card next to my water glass. If you ever want to speak to a graduate cohort, or if you need a professional reference of any kind, Ms. Hale, you have my contact. I stood when the room had found its footing again. I picked up my blazer. The one I had grabbed almost on instinct getting dressed. The one I had worn when Beckett and Lauren accepted the ASCE award at a dinner in downtown Chicago 18 months ago. And I folded it over my arm. I looked at my mother. Her eyes were wet. My father had his head bowed toward his plate. I love you both, I said. But tonight is the last time I am going to let either of you introduce me like a footnote in my own life. If you want me at your table going forward, it has to be me. The real version, not whatever fits better at a dinner party. My mother said my name. I walked out without waiting. 9 messages by morning. My mother's were long and looping, moving from hurt to defensive and back to hurt again. The last one came in just before midnight. I hope that career of yours keeps you warm, Imogen, because you have made this family feel very cold tonight. Gemma's message arrived at 12:40 a.m., short. I am not angry at you, I just need a few days. My father's came in at 6:53 in the morning. 5 words. I should have said more. And then a number I didn't recognize. A text, no introduction. This is Audrey Whitaker. Silas has talked about your work for months. I would love to have coffee the next time you're in town, or if you're ever in our part of Chicago. No agenda. I just think you're worth knowing. We met 3 weeks later at a place near my apartment. She told me that my mother had described me in September with what seemed like genuine, careful concern. The voice of a parent carrying something heavy, not the voice of someone being unkind. She said she had believed it, because worried sounds different from cruel, and she hadn't known to look for the difference. What do you call it, she asked me, when someone tells that kind of story about their own child? I thought about it. The refrigerator test, I said. Where you keep checking whether they've moved your picture somewhere people can actually see it. Audrey looked at me for a moment. Did they ever? I'm still checking, I said. Gemma called me 5 days after the dinner. Real apologies don't arrive in one clean statement. They come in pieces, over several minutes, stopping and starting, acknowledging things that needed to be thought through before they could be said out loud. She told me she had known, somewhere underneath it all, that our mother's version of me was a simplified one. She had told herself it was just mom being mom, and she had let that be enough of an answer. I made a choice not to ask whether it was hurting you, she said. That was my choice, and I'm sorry for it. She and Joel are still engaged. They pushed the wedding back by 3 months. They started seeing a premarital counselor. Not because anything was broken between them, but because Gemma said she wanted to go into the marriage clear-eyed about the family she was bringing with her. It was one of the more mature decisions I had ever heard my sister make. My mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon in November, 6 weeks after the dinner. I was at my desk in Chicago, going over revised drawings for a foundation issue on a project in Evanston. She didn't call my cell. She called the office line, which she had never done in 7 years. She said, "I have been telling a version of you that I made up." I didn't say anything. In the beginning, I think I was just trying to explain what you do in a way that made sense to people. And I would get it wrong, and you would correct me, very precisely, the way you do, and I would feel stupid. So I made it simpler, and then, simpler, and then at some point I stopped trying to understand it at all, and just started saying something that was easier for me. A long pause. I told those people you had rough patches because admitting I have no real idea what my own daughter does for a living. After 7 years, felt worse. That is not an excuse. It is embarrassing, and it was not fair to you. It was not the apology I had imagined when I was younger. The version in my head always happened somewhere visible, in front of people, with a table and a room and witnesses. What I got was a Tuesday afternoon phone call. My mother's voice slightly hoarse, like she'd been building up to it since morning, the sound of her kitchen faucet running in the background. It was more honest than the version I had imagined. Because it wasn't for anyone else. I told her that if she wanted to try again, she would have to let me explain my work to her. The actual work. Not the version she would take to the book club. The real thing, as much as she could follow. She said, "I know." I drove back to Cedar Falls on a Saturday in late January. No occasion. Just a Saturday, gray and cold, the interstate flat and straight the way Iowa always is in winter. My mother met me at the door with the inventory look, the fast eyes down and up she has done my whole life, and then she caught herself halfway through it and made a small private face that acknowledged she'd done it. I didn't mention it. We have too many years of that particular language to fix it in one afternoon. In the kitchen, I looked at the refrigerator. My 4th grade swim photo was still there, but the Gino's pizza menu was gone. And next to the swim photo, in a clear magnetic frame with a slightly crooked edge, was a printed page. The first page of the ASCE award citation. My name at the top, the project name beneath it, and one line of the description that had appeared in the trade press. Recognized for structural innovation in pedestrian load path design. The frame was the kind that comes in a 3-pack from a drugstore. It was tilted slightly to the left, like the decision to put it up had been made quickly, and she hadn't been sure yet what to do with the empty space where menu used to be. I straightened it with one finger. My mother was standing in the kitchen doorway. "The margins were off when I printed it," she said. "I had to print it 4 times before it looked right." "It looks right," I said. "I've been trying to understand the load distribution part," she said. "I watched a video online. I think I understood about a third of it." "That's not a bad start," I said. She made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, and she asked me, haltingly at first then more steadily, to explain how a bridge actually works. Not the simplified version, the real one. I took a paper napkin and sketched a basic span, showed her where the forces go, and how the loads travel from deck to support, explained what it means for a structure to carry weight elegantly versus just adequately. She asked questions when she lost the thread. She didn't pretend to follow the parts she didn't. She didn't redirect to Gemma. She didn't make the subject smaller than it was. It was not a healed family. Families don't heal like that, in one afternoon, over coffee and a napkin diagram. There is still work that will take longer than a Saturday, but it was something. A door that had been sealed for most of my adult life was no longer sealed. If you have ever sat at a table and watched your family edit you down into a version of yourself that was easier to present to people, hear this. The story they told about you was not a verdict on your value. It was a verdict on their discomfort with your complexity. Those are not the same thing, and you are not required to honor the confusion between them. The night Dr. Whitaker walked around that table and stopped at my chair, I thought for a moment answering honestly might cost me everything. My mother, the particular kind of peace that comes from staying small enough not to upset anything. What it actually cost me was the footnote, the convenient, simplified, behind-the-scenes version of me that had been written for other people's comfort. I had not come 4.5 hours from Chicago, had not spent 7 years doing work I believed in, had not won an award with my name on a plaque, on a bridge that people cross every day, to keep being someone else's footnote. Some people will need you to be smaller in order to feel comfortable around you. That need is theirs to solve, not yours to meet. When someone requires you to shrink as the price of belonging to them, that is not love. It is not even family, not really. It is management. And the first person who needs to know you are done being managed is not the one who has been doing it. It is you.